this is informal, so if I'm talking and you have a question, just interrupt me, that's fine. So I work with FWC. I am from Texas originally, though. I did my PhD in Texas. I grew up there, did all my schooling there, but worked with, what?
Where in Texas?
I grew up outside of Dallas, but I spent 10 years in South Texas before I moved here, so I feel like it's South Texas. And I worked with ocelots and bobcats, and ocelots are in a very similar situation to panthers in terms of what kind of issues they're facing, genetic problems, small populations. So it was very easy to transition from working with them to Florida and working with panthers. And hopefully my computer behaves because it is on its last legs. Okay, so there's 36 species of wild cats in the world. 7 of those occur in North America. And in Florida, we have 2. We have the panther and the bobcat. And panther is just a subspecies of puma. It's mountain lion, cougar, catamount, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same thing. We just call it Florida panther because it's a different subspecies. And of course, that's what makes things difficult when people get confused about the black panther thing, but we'll get to that. So there's genetically, they've looked at all the different subspecies in North America, and they've separated them out into 15. The Florida panthers, what used to occur across the southeast, and that's the yellow up there. It used to go all the way from Florida to Louisiana, and that northeastern subspecies in the red outline is actually extinct now. So the very rare occasion that you see a cougar show up there, like a few years ago, they had one in Connecticut. DNA showed that it actually came from Minnesota or Michigan, I forget which, but it came from the Midwest.
There was one in Maine too, I think.
I hadn't heard that one. We just had one in Kentucky that was treated by a dog, and the game warden shot it. We won't even go into that, but for safety reasons, and we're still waiting on the DNA results, but it's probably going to be another Midwest cat. So unfortunately, there's really there'll probably never be a population up in the Northeast again. It's just too many people. But of course, in Florida, it's just restricted basically to this current breeding range in Southwest Florida, and a few straggler males that get up north of that. And again, I'll go into detail about that. But like I said, we have another cat here. We have Bobcat. Much different in size and shape, but you'd be amazed at how much they get confused. I did see something on your Facebook page when I looked on there today, post something about panther-bobcat hybrids that actually has never been documented.
I've seen one.
You could probably do it in a lab, but it's not going to be in the wild.
Then it was a panther.
Could have been.
A small, semi-spotted, short-tailed panther.
They'll retain their spots for a little while, even when usually panthers are spotted when they're kittens, and they lose that when they get to be about 2 months old or so. But even as adults, sometimes you can see a little bit of spotting that's left, or if it's a young cat. And bobcats, even though they're much smaller, and we think of them as being bobtailed, which means it can only be a couple inches, sometimes the tail on a bobcat can be 6 to 8 inches long, and a lot of people don't realize that. So they think it has to just be really, really small. So that can be tricky. But big differences are the panther's tail is going to be the length of the body. A bobcat will never have a tail that long. And the back of the ears are black, while bobcats have a white spot. And of course, in general, panthers are going to be completely tan colored when they're adults, and bobcats will retain some kind of spotting. And it can vary. They can go from very beautiful rosette spots to just kind of this kind of muddled kind of color too. And of course, there's a big difference in size. Pushing it too much. There we go. So a panther female is going to be somewhere around 85 pounds, and a male is somewhere around 140 usually, as kind of the average that we see. And usually in Florida, a bobcat's going to be 25 to 30 pounds. It can vary. I mean, every now and then you might get some big monster, but usually the larger size bobcats, like 50 pounds, you're going to see up north because it's colder up there. Bergman's rule, you don't need to be really big and heavy if you live somewhere that's warm. So usually what we see down here is they're really leggy and tall and skinny because it's just hot and you don't need to be big like that. Lifespan, the females usually will live a little longer than the males. Males will fight for territories. That's what we usually see, about 10 years for a male, or a female can get a little above that. We had a female live to 17. She actually just died last year. So we do see that occasionally. Home range, the females again have a smaller home range, about 85 square miles, whereas a male will be 150 to 200 square miles. And to put that into perspective, That is the size of 96,000 football fields. It's the size of 4 Magic Kingdoms, or it's the size of the island of Guam. So it's pretty big. And the 2 main causes of mortality in Florida are roadkill. Last year was actually a record year. We had 25 roadkills, 34 total mortalities, 25 of which were roadkill. And intraspecific aggression, and that just means males fighting each other for territory. Occasionally they'll kill a female, but usually it's male to male. And the roadkill thing is a good and a bad thing. We never want to lose animals, but it's also a little bit of good news. It means there's more cats are moving around more looking for territory, and the population is remaining stable, slightly growing. So we're getting enough kitten reproduction to replace what we're losing. So the nice thing about Florida is it's nice and warm all the time, so you can breed year-round. We don't really see a peak like in other places. Like up north or in the Rockies, they're going to peak in the spring. But here they can do it year-round, and we do see that. After about a 3-month gestation period and finding these really dense palmetto thickets to den in, they have between 1 and 4 kittens. It's really not uncommon to see 3 or 4. They don't always live to dispersal age to be adults, but it's. And I went on a didnt, like you see here, there's 3, and they went on one a couple weeks ago, she had 4. So they can do it, and sometimes they actually manage to get them all to adulthood. They have kittens about every 2 years because the kittens will stay with them up to a year and a half. Somewhere between 9 and a year and a half, 9 months and a year and a half is when they'll leave mom. So it takes her a little while before she has the next set, so that's why we see it every 2 years. So a little bit about how to see this if you're out in the woods, and I brought some track guides and some pamphlets. I'll pull those out after. I don't know if I have enough pamphlets for everybody. I mean, the pamphlets, yes. The track guides, maybe not. But so that's why I would ask if you're going out in the woods and you spend time up there where you think you might find a track, please take a guide. But if you don't think that that's going to come in useful, then maybe save it just because they do cost a lot to print. But
what's the size of it?
That is.
Size of your hand?
I think it has it on there, but maybe not. About 3 1/4 inches both directions, tall and wide. So it's going to look almost exactly the same as your house cat or a bobcat, but the size difference. A bobcat's going to be about 2 inches, and I mean he's right. I mean you're talking about the palm of your hand, but it can get confused a lot of times with dog tracks, and dog tracks can be that big. Coyote tracks are smaller, but dog tracks can be that size. But the big indicators for a cat track are these teardrop-shaped toe pads, and the 3 lobes at the bottom is really key because canids don't have that. And then this kind of M indentation or flat part at the top, whereas on a canine track it's almost kind of pointed, and it's asymmetrical at the top. So what usually gets confused with some kind of canine track, a dog or a coyote, and the big difference is you can make this X shape through a canine track, and you can't, and without touching the pads. So you'll see it's drawn there, and it's just going through the gap. You can't do that on a feline track. You'd hit the pads if you tried to make that X shape, because a canine track is completely symmetrical. Those 2 toe pads are completely symmetrical, so is that one. And also the other key thing is looking for toenails. The dog track, you're pretty much always going to see toenails. Occasionally, if it's really soft sand or something, it may not show up, but for the most part, you're going to see the toenails. And they're going to be really thick. I mean, think about your dog's nails compared to your cat's. I mean, have you ever been scratched by your house cat? Really sharp and thin. And usually they're not going to show up on a panther track or a bobcat track unless you're in really soft sand. That's why you're just getting the little pieces of these in that soft sand. A couple things I like to dispel when I do these talks is there's no such thing as a Panther Pride. They don't hang out in unrelated groups. They only come together, they're solitary except for when they come together, male and female, to breed, or when a female has kittens. And that's actually the picture here is from South Florida, like I think it's Bobcat strand. This is a mother with 4 kittens that are basically at a dispersal age. So it looks like 5 adults sitting there. And we get comments sometimes from folks that say, well, now that they have Texas genes, I'm going to go over that, you know, we did genetic restoration in the past, that now they behave different and they're more aggressive and they hunt in packs, which, like I said, I'm from Texas, so I take offense to that. Like, why are they more aggressive if they're from Texas? But cats in the pumas in Texas, they don't hunt in packs either, so that whole thing is just, you know, crazy talk, and it's because people will see situations like this. But yeah, they don't just hang out in unrelated groups. They also can't be black. There's going to be somebody in here who's going to go, no. So they're varying shades of tan, and occasionally, like we said, maybe have some of the spots left over from when they're young, but it's just going to be on the underside. The reason why we've kind of gotten this misconception is because when jaguars and leopards have this melanistic phase, the black phase, there's a leopard, there's a jaguar, they're called sometimes black panthers. And so since we call our pumas here panthers, sometimes people just go, oh, what's a black panther? And they've actually found that the gene that causes the black phase is genetically linked to the gene that causes spotting. So that's why you see black phases in spotted cats. They've actually had black phases of bobcats in Florida. It's been years since I've seen a good record of one, but there's been a couple in Florida. Jeffrey's cats from South America, they're a spotted cat. They've had a black phase. But non-spotted cats like a puma can't be black. And another way I like to describe it when people are still skeptical is they range from Argentina to Canada. That's a massive amount of area. And think back all the way to the days when we had good record keeping, photographs. No one has ever shot or mounted or photographed or had in captivity a black puma. So that's pretty good indication to me that, I mean, I'd love to get proved wrong someday, but it's probably not going to happen. And I think what a lot of times happens when people see them and they think they look dark, also is you see it at sunrise or sunset and the light's weird, or the animal's wet or the animal's dirty, and so it kind of plays a trick on you. I mean, I've got pictures of some where I know exactly what it is, but it looks dark, and it's because the animal's wet or it's shady. What they like to eat is primarily deer and pigs. Of course, deer is a native prey, but pigs are not, so they are doing their part to get rid of all these horrible hogs. And I've heard from landowners who are very pro-panther because of this, and I've heard from hunters in South Florida who are very anti because they think they're eating them all, which they're not going to get any sympathy from me because they don't belong here to begin with, and they're horribly destructive.
Yeah, they're terribly ruining
destructive.
everything.
Yeah, and even if we had 5,000 panthers and trappers and hunters,
You'd never get rid
of the hogs. So they're probably safe. They just need to be better hunters if they can't find hogs.
And there you go.
But they'll eat smaller stuff. They'll eat
Stop being lazy. Go ahead.
They'll eat armadillos and rabbits and raccoons and gators sometimes, and occasionally, sometimes domestic animals. Really, we've only seen this be an issue in Collier County, occasionally in Hendry. And the ones in Collier County are basically Golden Gate estates where people are living on 5 to 10 acres in the woods, and they have hobby livestock like goats and sheep running around loose, and there's panthers and bears and bobcats and everything else. So they will occasionally take an animal, but if you build a wildlife enclosure, which is a pen you put them in at night, and then you're not going to have that issue anymore. And so we work with people down there for building enclosures when they have issues. But even though I say that they can occasionally take domestic animals, that doesn't mean that it's not the gateway drug to people. So just because they ate a goat doesn't mean that they're going to eat a person next. And just because they're around doesn't mean it's a threat. This isn't really as big of an issue up here because there might be one male that wanders through here every now and then, or there might be a resident male that I just haven't detected yet somewhere out in Mayaca or something. But there's been one in Manatee County that has been hanging around for a while. I've gotten pictures of, but the odds that you're going to see one come through your neighborhood somewhere in here are pretty slim. So you're not going to get as lucky as some of these people. This is a porta potty.
Yeah, I was like, that's pretty cool.
This is in somebody's backyard in Golden Gate Estates, drinking out of the bird bath. And I forget what this boardwalk was. I think it was Crew or Corkscrew or somewhere.
Do they ever go after horses?
It has happened in the past. Usually the biggest thing we've seen has been like goats and sheep, and then occasionally a calf, but for the most part, we don't see a lot of the large like calf or horse kind of issue, but it's happened in the past, but it's really low compared to the goats and sheep thing.
Right.
We've actually had one eat a wallaby in Golden Gate Estates. In Florida, it's weird.
Don't you think it's just a matter of time before they attack a human?
I mean, there's no way to know. I mean, there have been attacks out west.
A lot of them. I mean, are they genetically subspecies-wise that different behavior-wise?
I think, just my opinion in terms of where the most attacks have happened out west have been almost entirely like in California, places where people are hiking in very, very remote places in the mountains.
I lived in Denver. We had them right outside of town. Attacks. killing off.
Yeah, I can't remember when the last time Denver had, or Colorado had an attack.
It's just up a little ways.
Yeah.
Someone's jogging.
So, I mean, there's just no way to know. And here,
I guess the reason I'm bringing it up is I've lived out there, I hiked the Rockies a lot. People are told how to behave. They aren't told that here.
and we've been trying to change that. It's in our pamphlet, and it's actually one. It might be the
Like
next
letting your
slide.
kids run ahead of you and things like that. They
It's
just
actually the next slide.
Good. Okay.
We have done a lot of outreach to try to get this information out. You know, over the years, there's been so few Panthers. People who see them, it's just been so few and far between. They're doing better now. People are coming across them and finding them when they go hiking in Fakahatchee. So that occurrence, just the interaction, more people, more Panthers means more potential human-wildlife interactions. So we've been doing a lot of trying to get people educated about that. And it's in our pamphlet that I have, and basically it's don't run, don't incite that instinct to chase, be big, be loud. And I realize these are things that are sometimes hard to remember when you've got a big animal in front of you, but all the instances we've had where people have come across them at close range where they have done this, even if they haven't yelled or screamed, but just been loud, taking pictures, the cat will just sit there. They tend to act very indifferent to people, almost
Like a
kind of
cat.
curious.
Like a cat.
Like a cat.
They just kind of look at you.
I don't
They
care.
don't see you as a prey, but they don't see you as a threat. They're just kind of like, and they just kind of walk off. And a lot of times they call us and they say, "Why didn't it act scared? It must not be afraid of humans anymore." And just like I said on the previous slide, presence doesn't mean a threat. Usually they're just very curious and indifferent, and they just go on their way. And that's, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, there's no way to know for sure if it's ever going to happen. But if we can get people to understand how to behave if they come across one, usually the people who do are hunters who are like in full camo out in Big Cypress. They'll see one walk by, or hiking the trails down there in Fakahatchee or Picayune, places where there's just a lot more cats. So the chances up here are much lower, but if you do take a picture and count yourself really lucky. I've never come across one just when I've been out.
Oh, I'd be
All mine
thrilled.
have just been
I'd be like,
sedated
yeah.
or dead. So. But the whole like play dead, run thing, that's not for cats, that's for like grizzlies, so don't do that. Fight back. Fight back. Same thing with the black bear. Same thing with the black bear. If you come across a black bear, stay big, loud, throw something, scream, fight back.
Yeah, in Arizona we had an attack on a cyclist. So he was moving, and but he was very remote. He was
Yeah, a
way
lot of the
out
attacks I've heard have
in
been on
the canyon.
cyclists.
So I think he survived. But
Yeah, and there was one in California not that long ago where I think the guy was on a bike too. So that's just, I can't get inside their head to see why that behavior was different. And like I said, we have some people who are anti-Panther, very vocal anti-Panther people who tell us it's just a matter of time and what are we going to do? And we can educate and get people prepared and hope that it doesn't happen, but there's no way to completely know for sure. But the same thing with the bear issue, and FWC takes the bear thing very seriously. There's a zero tolerance policy with bears in neighborhoods now. They used to have a 3-strike rule. They don't get that anymore. If they're in a neighborhood and they're in the trash or around and somebody calls with a bear is euthanized. And that's a people problem actually, that you're attracting stuff. So I've kind of alluded to that there were very low numbers in the 80s and 90s. They thought there were about 30 cats, and when they started the Panther program, and noticed that they were suffering from inbreeding depression. They had kinked tails, they had calyx in the fur, males were crypt orchid, which means one or both of the testes don't drop. They had deformed sperm, holes in the heart. So basically, they had very low survival and almost no reproduction. Almost no kittens were being born. So they knew that they needed to do something, or this subspecies was going to go extinct. And the closest, remember that map at the beginning, the closest subspecies was Texas. And that doesn't make them a hybrid. When subspecies breed with each other, that's completely normal. Hybrids are 2 different species. So like a lion and a tiger, that's a hybrid. If there was actually a bobcat puma thing, that's a hybrid.
Wouldn't it
2
be
different-
sterile? That's what I heard.
Usually hybrids are, but when they're just the different subspecies like this, it's just completely normal. Like I said, I've mentioned the people who are very vocal with us about Panther issues, and one of the things they like to say is that these aren't really Panthers anymore, or they're really, Texas cats, and they do have Texas genes, but they would have had those anyway if they still arranged across the southeast and bred with them. So they've just restored that gene flow artificially. And we've just done it once. We brought in 8 Texas females in 1995, 5 of which actually bred and produced 20 kittens.